There is a principle in Catholic canon law called the seal of the confessional. It is one of the most absolute prohibitions in religious life. A priest who hears a confession cannot, under any circumstances, reveal what was said, not to law enforcement, not to a court, not to save a life, not to free an innocent person. The seal is inviolable. Breaking it results in automatic excommunication. No exception is permitted. No circumstance is recognized as sufficient. In 1991, a priest named Father Connor Healy heard a confession in a small Catholic church in Galway, Ireland. The man who made that confession told Father Healy that he had killed a young woman whose murder had been attributed to another man, a man named Patrick Daly, who had been convicted of the murder 2 years earlier and was currently serving a life sentence. Father Healy said nothing. He could not say anything. The seal forbade it. He was bound by the deepest obligation of his vocation. He carried what he had heard in silence for 11 years, until the man who had confessed to him died, releasing the priest from the seal's constraint. Even then, the path from Father Healy's knowledge to Patrick Daly's freedom was not immediate. It was complicated. It was fought over in courts that had to determine whether a dead man's confession, reported by a priest, constituted sufficient new evidence to overturn a conviction. It took 3 more years. Patrick Daly spent 25 years in an Irish prison for a murder he had not committed. A priest knew the truth for 11 of those years and could not speak it. This is the story of a wrongful conviction caught between the law of a country and the law of a church, and of what happens when those two legal systems are pointed in opposite directions. Patrick Daly was 33 years old in 1988 when he was convicted of the murder of a 26-year-old Galway woman named Siobhan Moran. Siobhan had been found on the outskirts of the city in July 1988, having been strangled. She had been walking home from a night out. Patrick had known Siobhan casually. They had attended the same secondary school a decade earlier and moved in overlapping social circles. On the night of her death, he had been at the same pub she had been at earlier in the evening. A witness said they had spoken briefly. Another witness said he had seen Patrick leave around the same time as Siobhan. Patrick said he had gone home alone. He had no one to confirm this. He lived alone in a flat above a hardware shop. He had gone to bed. He had known nothing of Siobhan's death until the following morning. There was no physical evidence connecting him to the murder. No DNA. The technology was not in routine forensic use in Ireland in 1988. No weapon recovered. No forensic trace on his clothing. What there was, 2 witnesses who placed him near Siobhan at the end of the evening, and a detective's instinct, built from the absence of any better suspect and the presence of a man who fit the available description, that Patrick was their man. Patrick was a quiet man, a carpenter, a regular churchgoer. He had no criminal record. He had never been in trouble of any kind. He had, by every measure, lived an unremarkable, blameless life in Galway for 33 years. He was convicted in October 1989. Life imprisonment. He said at sentencing, in a voice that everyone in the courtroom heard, "I did not do this. Before God, I did not do this." In a Catholic court, in a Catholic country, those words carried a specific weight. They did not change the verdict. The man who came to Father Healy's confessional in 1991 was named Sean Connolly. He was 44 years old. He was a laborer who had worked in various construction jobs across the west of Ireland. He was not known to Patrick Daly. He was not connected to the investigation. He had killed Siobhan Moran. He told Father Healy this in the confessional in October 1991, 2 years after Patrick's conviction. He had met Siobhan on the road. An argument had escalated. He had killed her. He had not known at the time that another man had been arrested and convicted. When he found out, he had been terrified and had done nothing. The terror had grown. The guilt had grown. He had come to confession because he could not carry it any further. Father Healy gave him absolution. He also told Sean, as directly as the confessional permitted, that he must go to the authorities and tell them the truth, that an innocent man was in prison, that this was a sin that required not just sacramental confession but human correction. Sean said he understood. He said he would think about it. He never came back to that church. He never went to the police. He moved to England in 1993. Father Healy, bound by the seal, could do nothing but pray and wait. He prayed. He waited. He said Mass every morning and gave communion every Sunday and administered the sacraments of a faith that had placed him in an impossible position, and he carried the sealed knowledge of Patrick Daly's innocence as the heaviest burden of his priesthood. He carried it for 11 years. Sean Connolly died in Coventry, England in 2002. He had a heart attack at the age of 54. He died without having gone to the police. He died as the only man outside the confessional who knew what Father Healy knew. With Sean's death, the seal was released. A confessor's obligation of secrecy is to the living penitent, not to the deceased. Father Healy could now speak. He picked up the phone. He called a solicitor. The legal question that Father Healy's call created was entirely without precedent in Irish law. A priest was saying he had heard a confession, now 11 years old, from a man now dead, that proved another man's innocence. The priest was willing to testify. The penitent was dead and could neither confirm nor deny. There were several layers of legal complexity. First, the question of whether the seal's release upon the penitent's death was recognized in Irish civil law. The seal is a canon law concept, and its implications for civil legal proceedings had never been directly tested. Second, the question of hearsay. Father Healy's account of what Sean had told him was, in a technical legal sense, hearsay evidence of the most removed kind. Third, the question of corroboration. Could anything about Sean Connolly be found that would support the confession's substance? Patrick's solicitor, a woman named Aisling Burke who had been working on wrongful conviction cases for 15 years, took the call from Father Healy in March 2002. She said later that she had heard many things in 15 years of this work, and that nothing had prepared her for a priest calling to say he had known an innocent man was in prison for 11 years and had only just been able to say so. She began building the case immediately. She found, through detailed investigation of Sean Connolly's life and movements, that he had been in Galway in July 1988, working on a construction project 3 streets from where Siobhan Moran was killed. This could be confirmed through employment records. She found that he had left Galway within 2 weeks of Siobhan's death, which was consistent with the flight of someone who had committed a crime. She found that in 1993, when Sean had moved to England, he had told a work colleague in Coventry that he had done something in Ireland that he could never go back for. The colleague was now retired and living in Bristol. He remembered the conversation. He was willing to testify. The case for Patrick Daly's innocence was building. But getting it in front of the Irish courts, and getting the courts to accept a dead man's confessional statement as credible new evidence, was going to require something more than the facts. It was going to require the courts to engage with a question they had never been asked before. Patrick Daly had been in Mountjoy prison in Dublin for 13 years when Father Healy made his call. He would be there for 2 more before the case reached the courts. 25 years in total. He had entered Mountjoy at 33. He was 58 when he came out. He had been in prison what he had always been outside it, a quiet, religious, patient man. He attended Mass every week in the prison chapel. He worked in the prison workshop making furniture. The carpentry skills that had been his livelihood applied now in a different context, with different constraints for a different purpose. He helped other inmates with the practical work of repair and construction that prisons continuously require. He had never been told, during those 25 years, that a priest had heard a confession that proved his innocence. He had not known. He had maintained his innocence through 5 appeal rejections on the available evidence, through the slow erosion of hope that comes from being told repeatedly that the matter is settled, and through the particular difficulty of maintaining faith, religious and otherwise, in a system that had done this to him. His sister Bridget had visited every month without exception. She had been the constant of his 25 years. She had written letters, engaged solicitors, contacted journalists, attended hearings. She was 62 years old when he came out. They had lost their parents, their mother in 1998, their father in 2004, while Patrick was inside. He had been taken from the prison to attend each funeral in handcuffs, returned immediately after. Both times, Bridget had held his hand at the graveside. Both times, the handcuffs had been on his other hand. She had never mentioned them. He had never mentioned them. That silence, he has said, was its own kind of kindness. The application for post-conviction review was filed with the Irish Court of Criminal Appeal in September 2004. The legal arguments were, as Aisling Burke had anticipated, complex and without clear precedent. The state opposed the application. Their position was that Father Healy's account was hearsay, the reported statement of a dead man, and that hearsay of this kind, however sincerely delivered, did not meet the evidentiary standard required to overturn a conviction. They also argued more broadly that accepting confessional testimony as a route to post-conviction relief raised serious concerns about the manipulation of the process, about the possibility that confessional claims could be fabricated or misremembered. Aisling Burke's counterargument was that the hearsay concern had to be weighed against the totality of the supporting evidence. Sean Connolly's documented presence in Galway in July 1988, his flight from the city, his statement to a colleague in Coventry, the consistency of his confession with the known facts of the case. She argued that this combination, taken together, was sufficiently probative to require a fresh examination of the conviction. Father Healy testified in person. He was 67 years old. He was cross-examined for 2 full days. He was asked whether he might be mistaken. He said he was not. He was asked whether the seal might be applied differently, whether the dead man's family might have rights he had not considered. He said the canonical position was clear. He was asked whether he had considered going to the police before Sean's death, regardless of the seal. He said, "I considered it every day for 11 years. I could not do it. The seal is not a suggestion." The court reserved judgment for 4 months. In February 2005, the Court of Criminal Appeal found that the combination of Father Healy's testimony and the supporting documentary evidence was sufficient to constitute new and material evidence that had not been available at the original trial. The court ordered a retrial. The state reviewed the case in light of the court's findings. They concluded that a retrial, in the absence of any evidence against Patrick Daly beyond the now undermined original witness testimony, was not in the interests of justice. The charges were formally dropped in April 2005. Patrick Daly had been in prison for 16 years when Father Healy made his call. He served 2 more while the legal process ran. He walked out of Mountjoy prison in May 2005 at the age of 50. He had been 50. He had gone in at 33. Patrick Daly received compensation from the Irish state, assessed at a significant figure for 25 years of wrongful imprisonment. He does not discuss the amount publicly. He returned to Galway. He was 50 years old and had not been there as a free man for 25 years. The city had changed. The workshop where he had done his carpentry had been converted into apartments. Several of the people he had known were dead. The priest who had baptized him had died in 1999. He found, to his own surprise, that he did not feel bitter about Galway. He felt like a stranger in it, which is a different thing. He said, "It went on without me. That is what places do." He resumed carpentry. He worked for a small firm in Galway for 3 years, then retired early. The compensation had given him that option. He lives in a small house on the coast of Connemara, west of Galway. He goes to Massachusetts. He makes furniture. He keeps a small vegetable garden that his sister Bridget helped him establish and still tends alongside him. Father Healy retired from active ministry in 2010 and lives in a Galway nursing home. He is 86 years old. Patrick visits him once a year on the anniversary of his release. They sit together and drink tea and do not, by Patrick's account, talk very much. There is not very much that needs to be said. Patrick has said that he does not hold anger toward Father Healy. He has said this carefully and specifically, not "I forgive him, but I understand." Father Healy did what his vocation required. The seal is not a choice. It is a condition. He has also said, "I hold something toward the system that convicted me on nothing." That is different. The system had a choice. It made the wrong one. Father Healy had no choice. He did what he had to do. Those are 2 different things, and I try to hold them differently. The case of Patrick Daly and Father Healy raised questions that the Irish legal system and the Catholic Church in Ireland are still navigating. The question of the confessional seal and its relationship to wrongful conviction is not resolved by Patrick's exoneration. It is sharpened by it. If the seal had not existed, or if the civil law had required Father Healy to speak, Patrick Daly might have served 2 years instead of 25. 23 years of a man's life sit in that conditional. The counter-argument, made by the Church and by many canon lawyers, is that the integrity of the confessional depends on its absolute inviolability. If penitents believed their confessions could be disclosed under any circumstances, the sacrament would be destroyed. The number of people who turn to confession as a mechanism for confronting and potentially correcting their crimes, which includes more than 0 people, would fall to nothing. The net effect might be more harm, not less. Both arguments are serious. Neither is wrong in its own terms. They are simply pointed in opposite directions, and in the space between them, Patrick Daly served 25 years. Siobhan Moran's family received, belatedly, the truth about who had killed her. Sean Connolly's family, his children, who were young when he died, were informed in 2005 gently by the Garda. The children had known nothing. Their father had carried his secret from them as completely as from everyone else. What that knowledge did to them is not a story that has been made public. It is theirs. Patrick Daly is 68 years old. He has been free for 19 years. He has spent, in freedom, slightly fewer years than he spent imprisoned. He was asked recently whether he had found it difficult to reconstruct a life at 50 after 25 years away from it. He said, "I had help. Bridget helped. And I had a trade. The furniture doesn't care how long you were away. The wood doesn't ask questions. You just pick up the tools and you work." He said, "The hardest part was learning to trust my own judgment again. When you have been told for 25 years that your account of what happened is wrong, even though you know it is right, something happens to your confidence in your own perception. You start to doubt things you should not doubt." He said, "But the wood doesn't lie. When a joint fits, it fits. When it doesn't, it doesn't. You measure. You adjust. You try again. It is honest work. It was honest work before. It is honest work now." He is in Connemara. He is working with his hands. He knows what honest work looks like. He always did.